Hello and welcome to the Daily Finance Wrap, your daily dose of personal finance updates covering everything from investments, real estate, insurance, loans, and everything else to do with your money. We, of course, bring in experts to talk to you about your money every single day, Monday to Friday, on the show. We also will take up questions and we'd love to hear from you, so feel free to write in with your questions and queries that we take up with our experts live on the show. But first up, a quick check of the top headlines that we're tracking this Monday evening. It was a full blown party on the Lal Street as the markets extended Friday's rally to gain a big gap up in early hours of trade. The Nifty and the Sensex cheered the victory of Maharashtra state elections. The Nifty and Sensex both went home with gains of over a percent, even though both indices closed below the day's high point. Broad based buying was seen across the markets, across large, mid, and small cap stocks. Modi trade was back in style, so everything from defensives to railways to PSU and PSU banks were the big gainers in today's trade. The PSU banking index gained between 2 to 4%. It wasn't just equities, but the rupee as well had a field day after losing consistently over the last 6 weeks, and the rupee rebounded in early hours of trade. Bond yields as well dropped following the landslide victory that the BJP-led NDA scored in Maharashtra. The rupee, which of course started the day at 84.37, gained from 84.46, which was Friday's close. All in all, it was celebration for bulls, be it equities, bonds, or the rupee. Well, shares of PSUs, like I said, were the big gainers in today's day of trade. Rights and Rail Vikas Nigam jumped significantly in today's session, up over 11%. Both railway companies announced important updates on major orders they each bagged. On 22nd November, Wright said that it had secured a significant railway electrification contract for the Limbing Badrapur line. Additionally, the Northeast Frontier Railway revised the cost estimate for this project. The new estimated cost for the order stands at 531 crores versus a previous estimate of 288 crores. In other news, the Morgan Stanley Capital International indices are undergoing their quarterly adjustment. Experts predict that Indian stocks could now see a net inflow of $2.5 billion due to FI passive flows. HDFC Bank, a major uh, player in the banking sector, is expected to attract attention as its weight in the index is set to increase. With five new additions and no deletions, the total number of Indian stocks in the MSCI Standard EM index will now rise to 156 post this adjustment. Additionally, 13 new stocks will be added to the small cap index, bringing India's total in that index to 525. Companies like BSC, Voltas, Alchem Laboratories, Kalyan Jewelers, Oberoi Realty will now also be included in the MSCI Global Standard Index as part of this latest rejig. Another more macro news, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman is set to present the Banking Laws Amendment Bill for approval during the winter session of the Parliament starting today. The bill, initially introduced during the previous monsoon session, is designed to improve services for depositors and provide investors with access to unclaimed funds. The bill proposes to increase the number of nominees allowed per bank account from the current limit of 1 to 4. The bill also provides for the transfer of unclaimed dividend shares and bond related interest or redemption proceeds to the Investor Education and Protection Fund. So, all in all, we've got an action packed day, or had an action packed day, and it promises to be a very exciting week ahead as well. But today, of course, we're going to do a little bit of a detour. We've talked about equity markets pretty much every single day, and we've talked about personal finance from a financial asset lens. Today, what we're going to try and do is talk to you about real estate, the significance of real estate in one's portfolio. And as Indians, of course, our love for real estate and gold is like no other. To help understand whether it's a good time to buy into real estate, we have with us a very special guest, Gulam Zia, Senior Executive Director at Knight Frank India, joining in. Hi, Gulam. Thank you for joining us. It's been a while. I'm going to start with a very basic question or a claim, like I'd say. You very often hear people, and you obviously hear it more often than I do, that real estate investments never lead to losses. I'm guessing that's your pitch as well to a lot of your clients. But is this claim true?
First of all, Samina, thank you so much for hosting me on this show. It's a pleasure to be with you on this show. And to start with, let me tell you, at least it's not a part of my pitch. I have never said that real estate never make losses. Even if you are investing in stocks of some real estate company, or even if you would have bought a shop or a house or even an office, it is likely that you may have to face losses if you haven't invested wisely. So just to put it on record, Samina, at least I don't believe or I don't stand by that myth that real estate never makes losses. Back to you, Samina.
Oh, well, Gulam, I'm so glad that disclaimer says it all. But it's very pertinent to talk about real estate today. Also, because we did see in the markets that anything real estate in Maharashtra had a significant rally in trade on anticipation that projects that are under completion will be completed. Now, let's bring this in context of actual real estate, right? Keeping the fact or the backdrop in mind that with a very stable government now in the state for the next 5 years, does buying into real estate in Maharashtra become a good idea? Is the timing correct?
Well, let's also put certain aspect in perspective. Real estate does not operate in isolation. Real estate, after all, is a service. You may buy a house because you have a job. You may get into an office because you've created a job there. So ultimately, everything comes and connects with the performance of economy. And that's the reason I'm trying to put across that real estate in isolation does not stand anywhere. So today, when we are talking about, and since your focus is Mumbai and Maharashtra, let me tell you that today, whatever the election results we are talking about is a good news from real estate perspective because we are expecting the so-called double engine growth to at last accrue to Maharashtra and focusing on Mumbai. We've been hearing about it for a long time. But we have seen many of the industries actually going to other states. It's obviously a competitive federalism. But then Maharashtra hasn't been really picking up the best of the industries, and large economic activities haven't really come to Maharashtra yet. So with this new firm government coming in, and why am I calling it firm? Because we have a clear mandate. Almost on its own, BJP shall be making its government. So there is no, question of the allies, etc., also throwing, their weight around or asking for some favors or this or that. That's not going to happen. So very clear that today we are very hopeful that a firm government in saddle, a chief minister who can call the shots by the merits, is a good news, and that will obviously create a good environment for job creation, economic growth. Well, infrastructure was in any case happening. Maybe the pace of improvement of infrastructure will improve now, will be better. So overall, the environment and the ecosystem is going to improve, and because of that, real estate shall reap good benefits.
Hmm. And
Over to you,
very
Sandra.
often, right, and very often we see after a very strong rally in markets, it's usually real estate that plays catch up. Yeah. And you're so right, right? Your purchase of your home, at least in residential or even if it's commercial, should be aligned with your objective. So let's take it one at a time. If you're somebody who lives in Maharashtra and is looking to invest in a residential property for consumption, let's start with that first. Would you recommend buying into all these new upcoming areas around Mumbai? And this has become a very common chatter around offices, right? Where everyone's betting on the next airport project, and smaller areas, upcoming areas are now where investors are looking at buying. Is that a good idea, you think, or you would stay away?
If it's about your requirement, like assuming you have an office somewhere in Navi Mumbai or Panvel or that side, and then you're buying a house somewhere in that locality, it makes sense. But if your job is elsewhere in the city, and suppose you're somewhere in Malad and you want to buy a house in Panvel, it doesn't make sense. So while infrastructure improvement, etc., is obviously extremely important, however, for you to go for buying that house that you're talking about, it shall be driven entirely by your mid to long term plan. It's not even short term. So mid to long term plan, whether it is your children's education, your healthcare requirements, and so on and so forth. A lot of things will actually have to be seen before the decision to buy that house comes in. So while infrastructure is improving, what it is really doing is giving a lot of land mass, I would say cheaper land mass for people to make affordable housing. And that's very simple that in that case, the I would say mid to bottom end of the pyramid is where there will be excitement with improvement in infrastructure. You can travel to longer distances and buy a cheaper house. So overall, it's not investment as you want to see the money grow. It's ultimately your consumption that will drive the decision to buy the house that you want to buy. Samina.
Great. Gulam, so if it's consumption, you've got to buy it at a place or a location that's convenient to either your school or your workplace or your family, right? Uh, but assuming, now let's work with the assumption that you want to invest in this affordable housing projects from an investment angle, where you want to buy today and maybe sell in a few years. Is that a good idea then to invest in these upcoming areas outside Mumbai?
Well, Samina, you may find it very awkward, but I have been for a long time telling people not to buy that house as investment. Please
Okay.
stay away from it as an investment because the real estate growth, the price growth, if I keep aside the last 2.5 to 3 years, where your price growth on an average is about 7.5 and 8%. Otherwise, when you actually consider inflation as well, you are mostly going negative. And a 10-year property cycle that we typically talk about, within that some 3 to 4 years of maybe above par kind of a growth does not give you a strong reason to believe that real estate or buying a house is a mode of investment. I would never suggest that you should do that. The ones who really do it are, in my view, punters. And for them, now comes the question that you asked, Samina. If you are identifying a certain location where you want to believe that suddenly some new airport will come or something else will happen, because of which the locality will improve and the area of the value of land in that locality will increase, and hence the value of the apartment shall also go up. That's a punt. You know what I would talk about in my favorite case studies? I have at least two of these cities I always talk about, say Hyderabad and Ahmedabad. These are two cities where they created infrastructure for future. And in these two cities, we haven't seen property prices appreciating at all. Net, it is actually almost alongside the inflation, the prices are going up, which is not really making a strong case for you to take housing as an investment opportunity. So I would rather say that if you're talking about seeking advice from me to where to buy, I am an absolute, very clearly in my thought that I would say never go for buying a house for investment. It's only for your self-consumption, nothing more than that.
Wow, this is why we like you so much, right? You call a spade, very clearly saying that only if you're consuming a residential property, then buy it. Gulam, very clear that don't try and punt it. This is not everybody's cup of tea, right? But I'm still going to ask you my next question because I do want to close out this loop. Keeping Maharashtra out, are there any states or any opportunities where one can look at to invest in upcoming residential projects as an investment, not consumption?
I would not say anywhere. I would once again go back to the answer I gave in the for your last question. Keep away. Residential is not really an asset class. It's not a gold that you suddenly you require a fund. Tomorrow you will sell the gold and make your money. It's such an illiquid asset, and comparatively, you have so many different kinds of assets at your disposal which are giving you far
Yeah,
better and smarter returns. Why look at housing?
you're right.
I would rather say keep away. Don't get into which city, which state, which region, which locality. Just keep away from housing as an investment opportunity. Just a consumption. That's about it.
And I guess if you want to invest in real estate, you have financial real estate tools such as REITs now, right? We can, of course, discuss that on the next show when we talk about how you can invest in real estate without actually buying that next project. Do you have the same emotion, Gulam, when it comes to commercial real estate, or could this be an investment opportunity?
That I would also want to bring in over here buying land as a possibility, because that's something which at least we in Mumbai and Maharashtra haven't been exposed to. But up north, there is a concept of plotted developments. Developers sell you plots. Now that still has some kind of a possibility of getting some returns over a period of time. because you have land with you which you're waiting for it to appreciate. And that's when the chances of you making a good decision for a plotted developments are far better compared to actually putting that money in buying a house, a built house. So I would say focus on picking up something in land. If it is available, do that. Now coming to your question about commercial real estate.
Actually, Gulam, before you go into that, and why don't you tell us, are there any areas in and around Mumbai or in Maharashtra that have attractive land parcels that one could consider investing? And of course, with the disclaimer that you got to talk to a local broker and understand more. But anything just on top of your mind that one could do some research on?
The basic factor you must keep in mind is what is it that will give you growth for the plot that you're buying. Two things. One, either you will look at tourism or, I would say recreation or entertainment as one focus. And two is job creation. The first one is, if I'm residing in Mumbai, I would look at say Alibag or some hills around it, Lonavala, etc., where I would love to buy a property because, the wealth creation and the mid to upper end of the society increasing, the aspirations to buy that second home or take another plot somewhere is also increasing, and that is what will take the valuation of these properties higher. On the other side, job creation, you may know that certain area in future may have some a new warehousing project coming up, or a new industrial location is opening up. So in and around that area, you may want to buy a plot in anticipation that in future where those job creations are happening in that locality, then you should. Like for example, when you talk about Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, it is passing through Aurangabad, and there are these two new destinations called Shendre and Bidkin. There are these two absolutely greenfield cities that are being created. So if one would have taken some position in and around that area where suddenly so many new jobs would be created, the land would appreciate much faster than any other asset class. So that's where investment is possible when you are wisely analyzing your parameters instead of just punting in the way we spoke or answer. I gave the answer for the previous question.
No, it's so good. I mean, this is such realistic advice coming, right? Let's go back to and talking about Alibag. I think that's now being touted as the Hamptons. Far from it, but nevertheless, this is our version of Hamptons, I think. Let's talk about commercial real estate. Does commercial real estate look like a compelling investment? You want to quickly have a go at that?
Absolutely. Commercial real estate is going to be driving the growth in the country for next at least 8 to 10 years, if not more. Because we are always talking about a 3.5 trillion economy going to 10, 15, 20 or whatever. I don't know exactly how long, but then nobody can stop that growth. It's already happening. 3.5 to 4 trillion is just around the corner. 4 to 5, 5 to 10 is going to happen, and that will drive commercial real estate. Now, commercial real estate, we talk about commercial, you can also add shops or retails area also in it. And the possibility of finding investment in that category is a little difficult. Please understand, the offices these days are not small 500, 600 square foot offices. These are, 50,000, 100,000 square feet per floor or per unit types. So for small investors, it is very difficult to participate in the commercial real estate rally. So the only option that remains for you as a small investor is to perhaps buy a shop somewhere in a residential colony where some amount of retailing will happen. That is one possibility. But as far as large offices are concerned, while it's a great opportunity, it's only for those who have very deep pockets, or the other possibility that you don't want to answer right now is to invest in REIT. Whenever you are doing the next session, you can explain it at length.
I'm going to catch you again for my next session, but also quick view on rental yields. I mean, I know India doesn't offer the most attractive rental yields, but you want to tell us what the range of rental yields are if somebody's looking for, regular income in that sense by renting out a commercial property. What should be a fair expectation in residential and commercial?
Okay, let us start with residential. As I said, you may perhaps say that I have a very, very hopeless or pessimistic view of residential real estate.
No, we love it because I know all our viewers love real estate. So a reality check is always good.
The rental yield on residential asset class is pathetic. 2.5% on an average to 3%. And when you are investing to maintain that property and pay property taxes and this and that, mostly you are lucky if you get zero returns. Otherwise, you could have negative returns. So residential real estate is something which I would want once again to be kept aside when you're talking about rental yield, and perhaps there's a reason why rental housing is not really a proper asset class in this country yet. In future, the situation may change, but at least for now, for next short to medium term, we don't really see residential asset class coming in as a rental asset class as yet. On the other side, commercial, the yield on commercial can actually move from minimum 6.5-7%, can go up to almost double digits. Like if you are really finding a certain asset which is absolutely most in demand, then you can actually be closer to double digits as well. But the yield in commercial properties are far better, and making a very strong case for an investment on a rental property where you may have a annual recurring income coming your way. So that way, as I said, on an average, you can consider 7 to 8% of a rental yield coming in if you're buying into a commercial asset. Over to you, Sabina.
Kalamba, just one quick question, which is not part of script, but I'm very intrigued to ask you. Uh, if you do have the money, so you're of course not desperately seeking a bank loan, you have some amount of a corpus. Would you rent or would you buy? If rental yields are as compelling as 2.5 to 3%, I am forced to believe that it might be better to just rent rather than get an asset and get funding. You rather than money work for you in equity markets and an appreciating asset class, which I think
Absolutely.
real estate too is. But please,
I think you asked this question because you are encouraged by my previous responses, and I can tell you that the industry hates me for saying so. But there is no reason for you to buy that apartment that you are to live in. Rather, rent it. You're absolutely right. I would put that money, which I would block in buying that apartment, into various other asset classes, or if nothing else, on myself. If I as a businessman can have a return on investment of at least 15-20%, why would I get all that money stuck in a buying a house which would perhaps not fetch me more than 7-8% growth all in all, including rental yield as well as your property price appreciation? I don't think it is not even in 8 to 9%. So there is no reason for you to actually buy that house. And that is why many of these the Gen Zers and the next generation is not too keen to buy that apartment. While a lot of these developer lobby these days would want you to believe that post COVID they are keen, that they want to buy an apartment, etc., etc. But this is a newfound understanding that most of these Gen Zers, etc., are coming up with, that they are better off in renting an apartment than going out and buying. And I don't think that situation has changed much after COVID. So I
I'm
would
asking
say
a tough question. Do you
invest that
rent?
money,
Do you rent or
invest
do
that
you
money in
own?
yourself.
Are
Sorry.
you renting or do you own your house? Abhi
Unfortunately,
sach dudh
unfortunately, I'm Gen X, Gen Z. I don't know which generation I am. When I was out there in the market to find my wife, I had to have an apartment to show that
Oh,
I can marry a lady. So I'm in that. I belong to that generation. I had to buy an apartment, so I have one.
hmm.
If
Oh,
if
so
if, if I would be
yes,
reborn, if I would
you
be
would not be
reborn
buying
today,
a house.
I would not buy an apartment. I would live my life in rented apartments.
So true. I also want to quickly ask you this. So this, I think Indians also somewhere are like Americans in that way. Right? The American dream is to have to own your home. Gen Z doesn't believe in it, which I think is promising because they're getting smarter with their money, and that's worth noting. But just as closing thoughts, Gulam, let's simplify this. So, if you've got residential, if you want to own a home and buy a home, and if you're like Gulam, where you need to find a wife, or you need to find a partner and hence need a home, then you should buy one. But if it's only for consumption, best avoid it. This rule applies both in affordable housing, Gulam, and luxury housing as well. Because if you look around where I live, around Bandra and Pali Hill, you've got some amazing buildings that have come up, and most of them are selling out quite quickly.
So true. This is actually once again the demand supply scenario. Your demand for rental housing is abysmal. It's hardly existing. And these Gen Zers that we're talking about, barring a few who would have hit a unicorn, and very rare who would have come up with a unicorn, for rest of them, there is no money to actually buy that apartment or even rent. So many of them you will find them in, sharing accommodations and this and that. So the next generation, another 5-7 years, when they would have made their wealth, they will decide that they would be renting it. And at that time, you will see a good demand for rental housing, and then a lot of these. In fact, since you're talking about Bandra, Let me tell you, about 20 years back, when I was marriageable age, that time there were a few buildings. I will tell you the names of those buildings separately, where apartments were only for renting.
Oh,
You would find it hard to believe, but there have been apartments which were only for renting. Only recently the whole phenomenon of no renting apartments, etc., has come up because selling is such a big proposition. But in future again, we shall see apartments which will be only for renting, and that is when the situations will turn, because right now you don't have that much of demand to justify for building an apartment building only for renting.
hmm. Okay, so that of course wraps up our conversation. But very quickly, if somebody doesn't want to listen to you or me and still wants to buy a home or a piece of land, which I think you've recommended in places like Alibag or Karjat, what is it that they need to keep in mind? We often hear that deeds have to be very clean and you've got to ensure that the paperwork is in order. Because I think buying a property is actually not as simple as buying a REIT or a stock, even though it comes with maybe the same risk, if not more.
Well, here the situation changes. If you're buying a land, it's much, much more complicated than buying an apartment. When somebody is constructing an apartment, a developer, highly likely that would have taken a construction funding CF from a bank or financial institute, and that financial institute would have run all the checks and balances to ensure that the project is compliant, that the titles are in place, etc., etc. So when you're buying an apartment, highly likely that you're not going to make a mistake, because also with regulator RERA coming in place, mostly I would say 99% I'm sure that most of those issues that we would have faced about 20 years back don't exist anymore. So it's much easier. You don't have to worry much while you're buying an apartment. Just look into your RERA registration of the developer, whether the project is registered there or not. But in case of land, it's a different ball game altogether. You need to be very cautious, as you rightly said. Samina, you may need to have a lawyer who understands the title and land records, etc. And only then you should get into buying a land. Otherwise, it's going to be very complicated.
Hmm. Thank you, Gulam, for that. We've got a couple of questions. We're over time, but very quickly, we have one question, and you can be as quick and pointed on this one. Somebody writes in and they say, Navi Mumbai or Thane, which Mumbai suburb is a better investment? I mean, if they've heard our show, they shouldn't be asking this question, but I'm still going to let you have a go.
Well, I would talk about Navi Mumbai because that's the direction where historically the growth on the way to Pune, etc., was happening. First, the Mumbai Pune Expressway, etc. But more than both Thana and Navi Mumbai, I would say it's time for you to seriously look at the Ahmedabad highway. That is Vasai Virar and Palghar, etc. Because now with Vadavan port opening up, you will see a completely different movement of this area, far faster, far better than the other two corridors that you're talking about. So my money is on the Alibag corridor, the Ahmedabad corridor.
Even though you want your holiday home in Alibag, so you've come to Alibag twice by mistake. Vineet Patel also asked a question. He says, give us a view on the NCR market. Are prices expected to stay sluggish?
Well, when you're talking about NCR, it's once again almost like two-state situation. On one side, you have Gurgaon, where the prices have gone completely berserk. On the other side, you have other locations like Ghaziabad, Faridabad, Manesar, and so on and so forth, where the price rise is not so high. So overall, I would say in locations like Gurgaon, etc., it's hot. It's a hot potato. You should not even touch it because the prices right now A are unaffordable. B have risen so much that from here I only see the prices going down, if not tomorrow, in a year or so. Whereas there are a lot of these markets where the price rise was not as crazy as say a Gurgaon or a few locations or pockets. Even in Noida, the price rise was pretty silly. But on the other side, as I said, for every Noida and Gurgaon, there's a Faridabad, Ghaziabad, etc., or Sonipat, or even extending up to Panipat, etc. Because Delhi, for infrastructure, you must look at Delhi because the way the infrastructure is growing is outstanding. Meerut, for that matter, has been connected to CP where you can travel in less than an hour, which used to take 2 hours, say about a year back. So a lot of those changes are happening in Delhi, and that is why, because they're creating those fast rail networks connecting even Alwar, which is all the way up to Jaipur in Rajasthan. All these tracks will give you a lot of access to cheaper land, which will keep the prices of real estate under check. So Delhi market, a hot potato, be very careful.
Gulam, always such a pleasure talking to you. Have a good evening and a great week, and we'll hopefully see you soon.
Thank you so much, Amina. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, Gulam. Bye.